and gentlemen, we have a future member of Congress in our midst. There are 6 people who would like to be, who are vying for that position. We're going to hear from each and every one of them tonight, give you a chance to help make your decision. And I'm excited about everyone that's here. There are 756 people RSVP that they're coming to this event tonight. That's amazing. There are, as you know the story, that when we put out, we were hoping that the first room we had rented would work, and it filled up in 48 hours. So we had to double the size of the room. We couldn't go any less than double, but we're proud for everyone that's here and everyone that'll join us. Ladies and gentlemen, I will introduce to you 2 very professional folks who we have moderating and asking questions of our candidates tonight. They are Mr. Randy Evans, the national committee man for the Georgia Republican Party and Republican extraordinaire. He needs no introduction. He travels all over the world. If you're his friend on Facebook, and I'm sure if you're not, if you send him a friend request, you can be. He travels all over the world for our party. He and especially all over America. And I know he's been working on the details for the debates, for the presidential debates in 2016 in the last week or so. But we are proud that he's a resident of the 11th district. And also takes care of business here at home. Thank you, Randy, and we're glad to have you. No less a notoriety, maybe someone who many of you sat under his teaching at Kennesaw State. He's well known. He's an opinion maker. He is just the kind of person that we needed to make this debate round out at the moderator's table tonight. Dr. Kerwin Swin. Join me in welcoming Dr. Swin. And from now, we'll see our candidates and we'll begin to hear from them. And I will introduce them in reverse alphabetical order, because that's just one way to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me as I call their names as they join me on this stage. And it will be your opportunity to whoop and holler and make all the noise you'd like when each candidate is introduced, and then when they're all introduced, and we'll do that. After that, I would ask you to hold your applause for the rest of the debate until closing statements, because if we give too much time for crowd reaction and applause, it'll take up the valuable time that we have to hear from our candidates. From the podium to my left, join me in welcoming Tricia Bradmore. Next, in the podium, join me in welcoming former State Senator Barry Loudermilk. Join me in welcoming former Congressman Bob Barr.
I can't even get the microphone turned on properly. That's already important. First of all, I want to join Scott in welcoming everyone. Scott has done a phenomenal job as the district chair. He's done a great job of putting this together, and I think we owe him a great round of applause for all of us. And I could tell you that having traveled the country, as many of you know, that there is no finer group of candidates for Congress than the group that you have before you, and we are indeed quite fortunate that one of them will become our representative in the United States House. And that's a great tribute to the quality of our district and of the folks who serve us. The very first part here is to allow each candidate an opportunity to introduce themselves. And so I guess we'll start here doing in alphabetical order, and we'll start with Bob Barr. Bob?
Thank you, Counselor. My name is Bob Barr, and I am running to represent the people of the great state of Georgia from the 11th District in the House of Representatives of the United States of America. The reason that I'm running is because our country, Reagan country, is in dire danger of becoming Obama country. And I vow and am committed to do absolutely everything in my power in the arena in Congress where I've served previously to make sure that that never, ever happens. Now, there are a lot of folks here this evening, and 5 other great candidates here on the podium with me. None of us in this room are the enemy. The enemy is in Washington. The enemy is those that we know. Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama. They are the enemy, along with faceless bureaucrats all across this country, and we must do everything within our power to stop them in their tracks. Now, that is not to say that there are not differences. There are differences among the candidates here this evening. This is essentially a campaign between the want-to-dos and the have-done. I have served in the Congress. I have been in the arena. I have voted and worked to balance the budget and succeeded at that, in cutting taxes and protecting our civil liberties. Send me back to Washington to complete that job that we started and move forward with. Previously, I asked for your vote for the 11th District. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Loudermilk, and first let me thank you for being here. The fact that you're here tonight shows you care about our nation and our children's future. You know, I was born and raised not very far from where we're standing here tonight, but after I graduated high school, I took a job as a laborer with a construction company in Alaska. And while I was in Alaska, I also volunteered at a local church, ministering to underprivileged children. And while I was working in that ministry, I met a beautiful young lady by the name of Desiree. And just a couple months ago, we celebrated our 31st wedding anniversary. You know, after I finished working in Alaska, I followed in the footsteps of my father, who was served in the Army in World War II, and my brother, who served in Vietnam, and I joined the Air Force. And after 8 years of military service, I moved back to Georgia, where I started my own small business, which I've been running for the last 20 years. Today we have 3 beautiful children that we're extremely proud of, and we're especially proud that our oldest son and our daughter-in-law are giving us our first grandchild, which is due about the time of the election. You know, America has some serious challenges ahead of us. Challenges that are brought by big government, an overwhelming debt, and continual attacks upon our liberties, our freedoms, and the basic principles of faith, family, and freedom. But I know we can take America back, because I believe in American exceptionalism. I believe that we not only can take America back, we must take America back. The only reason I'm running for Congress is because our children and grandchildren deserve better than what we're passing on to them. God bless you.
So now I get the privilege of asking the first question, and we will respond to the question. I would ask each of the candidates to respond in reverse alphabetical order, which means that we will begin with Ms. Patmore and work our way toward Mr. Barr. When Newt Gingrich was elected in 1994 and became Speaker in 1995, he faced a daunting challenge, which was to balance the federal budget. And yet, through hard work and commitment, he was able to do that. We again face a situation where we have a federal debt that's completely out of control. Congressman Paul Ryan has offered an outline for a budget of how to reduce the budget. In what areas do you believe Congressman Ryan's plan goes far enough, and where does it not go far enough?
You know, I applaud Representative Ryan for what he's doing with the budget. It is clear that he is trying to make going the right direction of a balanced budget. However, history has proven that Congress, when it's left to itself, will not cut its own way of spending money or cut its own power. So we must have a constitutional amendment for a balanced budget. Now, he has a 10-year plan to get to a balanced budget, but it isn't real cuts in spending. It's cuts in the increases of spending, as we've seen so much. Now, if we have stability in the economy, then you can decrease the increase of spending because the GDP will catch up with you. But Congress has made no plans that the policies they've been passing have actually been hurting our economy. We have to bring confidence back into the economy. Some of the things that I think we need to be more aggressive in the cuts is cutting in some of the subsidies. The farm bill that was recently passed had very little to do with farming. It was mostly an increase in the food stamp program. You know, I grew up in a very low-income area south of Atlanta, and I had several friends that their families were on food stamps and welfare. And I remember that when my friends would tell me that, the parents would get upset because they were embarrassed. They were on it because it was a temporary solution. When we now advertise, come and get your food stamps, that's a problem with our society that has to be changed. But Congress is going to have to be more aggressive, and we're going to have to force a balanced budget amendment.
Congressman Ryan has done the American people a favor, at least putting on the table a marker, a specific proposal to cut spending by $5.1 trillion. That would be great, but it's over 10 years. Now let's think about that. We have a current federal spending of nearly $4 trillion in 1 year. He is proposing to cut $500 billion per year. That is a start, but that is all it is. What we need to do is to couple that overall strategy with what we did when I served in the Congress of the United States from the 7th District, and which got us to a balanced budget, and that is to use the power of the purse strings in the House of Representatives and deny this president, as we denied President Clinton, and refuse to pass all of his spending bills. That forced him to the table, and we got a balanced budget in 4 years.
So I think now we have a Twitter question.
We now have 2 Twitter questions. Before the debate started, we went into a room and everybody picked one question that they're going to get asked by Angela and I. Angela Diana Santos is the Executive Vice President of the Independent Republicans, and she has the first question.
Okay, this question is for Barry Loudermilk, and it is from @KeithHanks, who I believe is over there. Wave, Keith. Hi, Keith. In 2014, how do you define the American dream? How has it changed, and how can Congress improve it and/or hurt it?
Well, that's a great question. In fact, I was speaking to a group of college students recently and asked, how many of you believe that the next, your generation will actually be able to achieve the American dream? And very few raised their hands. In reality, the American dream isn't the way I defined it, it's not the way the government defines it, but the way you define it. Our founding fathers defined it as the pursuit of happiness. The government exists to protect your right to pursue happiness. Unfortunately, our government now has transitioned from a government of the people to a government over the people, and it tries to control everything we do. In fact, I saw recently someone campaigning for office said, Washington is out of control, and I disagree, because they control our health care. They control our guns, they control our education, they control virtually every aspect of our lives, but they can't even seem to control their own checkbook. So what we need is less. Less Washington, less government, let the people define what is the American dream for them and allow them to achieve it. Thank you for the question, it was all over.
All right, great. The next question.
And we can start with this problem. Work way down. I know you can't see me, but I'm down here, I promise. And my question is about everyone's favorite subject, and that is taxes. We love them, right? I looked at all of your web pages, and all of you talk about tax reform, and I think most of you talk specifically about the fair tax. And conservatives talk a lot about the fair tax. It's a big issue. But realistically, it's not going anywhere. It's not moving in Congress. It's not getting any traction. In fact, a lot of independent analysts have looked at the fair tax, like at the University of Virginia. There was a study from Money Magazine that raised serious questions about the implementation of the fair tax and about its future. So that being the case, is it time to admit fair tax is maybe not all it's cracked up to be and move on to more fertile areas of tax reform?
The first and foremost thing we have to do is eliminate the IRS. That is the most important aspect. It projects itself in our lives and our liberty, and I think everybody in here has faced that, and you've seen what's happened over the past several years. There's challenges with each one. The flat tax is the simplest to move over to, just go to a 10% across the board flat tax, but the argument becomes, do we have certain deductions still? Can we deduct charitable contributions? Or what about your mortgage interest payments? Can we still deduct those? That argument's going to be there. The biggest problem with the flat tax is it still leaves in place the 16th Amendment, and it taxes you achieving the American dream. The fair tax is complex. It has so many moving parts, and it has a rebate that's involved with it. But the problem that we have with the fair tax is there's no transition plan. I mean, as a small business owner, I can't do a major changeover in my business without some type of plan for transitioning. Now, I've met with the authors, the idea makers of the simple tax, and it's a brilliant idea. It simply transitions us immediately to a flat tax, repeals the 16th Amendment, goes to a national sales tax, and if the 16th Amendment is not ratified, the repeal isn't ratified, we fall back to a flat tax.
President Reagan, if he were here this evening, would say in answer to that question, the same answer that as a Reagan conservative I give. Not only no, but heck no. We should never, ever, ever give up on what is right, and we try to do what is right for America. Now, we all know that the IRS is bad. It is bad evil. And we also know that the most powerful force in the universe is the force of the status quo. It is difficult to move a seemingly immovable object. It is difficult to get rid of the income tax. It is difficult to get rid of withholding. But if we simply lie down and say, oh, the opponents of the fair tax have beat us down and it's no longer viable, then they win. I refuse to let the liberals win. I refuse to let the status quo win. We must continue, as we did back in the 1990s, to continue to press forward from the grassroots on up. It's not going to come from the top down. It comes from we, the people, to keep the pressure on Washington, to keep the pressure on the bureaucrats, and we will get there.
So, and for this question, we will start with Mr. Barr and work our way to Ms. Pridemore. By all accounts, we're in the midst of a constitutional crisis. The reason we're in the midst of a constitutional crisis is we have an imperial president who shows no regard for the boundaries and the separation of powers. As an individual member of Congress, what would you do to serve as a check against the uncontrolled power being exercised by President Obama?
Well, as the House of Representatives member who first called for the impeachment of President Clinton, I have a little familiarity with how to stop a president run amok. There are in fact several specific steps that as a member of the House of Representatives you can take. First of all, the president cannot spend one dime for the running of the White House or anybody working there or any of the commissions without having funds appropriated by law from the Congress of the United States. That starts in the House. And when a president signs an executive order that goes beyond his authority, which we have seen this president do time and time again, it is time for the House of Representatives to attach a rider to the White House Appropriations Bill denying any money can be spent for that particular order. They can do the same thing for any particular action by any department of the government or any agency or individual in the government. That will do one of two things. It will either force the president to sign it because he needs that spending bill, or it forces him to do what we did with President Clinton. It forces him to come to the table and talk about these issues on our terms. We have that power in the House. We need to define the rules of the playing field and actually hold this president accountable and stop him through the power of the purse strings.
About 3 weeks ago, I got a call from the New York Times, and the reporter said, we want to fly down, if you're having an event, we want to come and visit one of your events. We hear you got a lot of momentum in your campaign, and you We've been endorsed by most of the conservative groups throughout the United States. And we want to come down and visit you while you're having an event. And the whole thing that you want to interview us about was this very subject matter here about the imperial presidency. And after I sat down and did the interview, I found out just the other day that the RNC actually read that article and said, this is the talking points that we're going to send out through all Republican candidates. And that originated right here. Look, there's three things that have to happen. One, we created this storm. Congress created a perfect storm because you can't control the other branches if you don't even have a budget. For years, we didn't even have a budget. We were giving a blank check to the president. We must have a budget, and we must have the courage to stand up and exert the constitutional authority of the legislative branch. And third, we have to have leadership that has the courage to stand up against the President of the United States when he violates his constitutional authority and not give him a blank check and just allow him to borrow money without any control. As we just recently did, we expanded the debt ceiling without any control. We have to have courageous and strong leadership, even in our own party, who will stand up and who will exercise the constitutional authority of Congress.
Now we have the final two Twitter questions.
This is for Representative Lindsay from @Sarah N. Beck. How do you feel about foreign aid and what are your recommendations for reform?
First off,
Thank you. The next question is for Bob Barr from @W. Sullivan. What is the most important thing you believe Congress can do to stimulate the economy and create jobs?
On the global level, strategically, we need to get the heck out of the way. We need to reduce the regulatory burdens, reduce the tax burdens, get the federal budget balanced so that we create certainty instead of the uncertainty that is holding back our economy right now. We also need to do everything we can to ensure energy dependency, which we are moving toward as a result of the tremendous technology that we've seen in the last few years with regard to shale oil exploration. Specifically, though, as a member of Congress, there are legislative proposals that we need to champion and make sure we get through, such as the Rand Paul bill in the Senate with its counterpart in the House, the REINS Act, R-E-I-N-S, which will force an administration to come to the Congress and get approval for any regulatory burden that exceeds a certain amount. $100 million probably ought to be lower, but I'll take that over what we now have. So the Congress, once again, forces an administration to come to the Congress, the House of the people, and make sure that those regulatory burdens and those tax burdens do not continue to mount and hold down our economy.
Okay, for this next question, we're starting with Mr. Loudermilk and moving to his right. We'll come back to the last two candidates. And it's about immigration. Immigration policy is controversial for Republicans in 2014. Some Republicans have advocated comprehensive immigration reform, advocating a pathway to citizenship. Recognizing the importance of the Latino vote in Georgia and nationally in the future, what's your position on this controversial area?
Well, it's interesting, that comes up a lot throughout the campaign, and it always amazes me as a legislator serving 9 years in the State House and State Senate. We always want to create new laws when we're not even enforcing the ones we have on the books. And the first thing we need to do is secure our border. It's a national security issue. It truly is dangerous. I spent 6 days on the border back in 2006 with a Border Patrol agent. When we were looking at doing immigration reform here in Georgia, we decided, a group of us legislators, 3 of us went down and we spent a week on the border. And we saw how dangerous it was. I've also been down to South Georgia and visited with the farmers and seen the challenges that they face with the guest visa or the work visa program. So we need to secure the border. We need to fix the legal immigration system. It now takes between 10 and 15 years and $12,000 to $15,000 for someone to legally immigrate into the United States. And that needs to be reformed and fixed. And we need to have a usable work visa program that not only will allow people to come in and work, because quite frankly, we've created an environment in our society where we pay people more to sit at home and not work than actually go out and work. So it leaves a lot of our employers with a situation where they have to bring in immigrant employees. And so it needs to work, not only to allow them to come in, but be able to track them and know when it's time for them to leave and that they're taken back to the border to go home.
There are two myths lurking in that question. One is that Hispanics in this country will necessarily vote for Democrats simply because Democrats believe in amnesty and a path to citizenship. The other myth is that Hispanics will not vote for Republicans if we say we believe in the rule of law, and that means protecting our border and fighting illegal immigration. The vast majority of Hispanics in this country believe in the rule of law just as we in this room do. And they want to make sure that the opportunities available to them are the opportunities that aren't taken away by illegal aliens coming into this country. Very simply, one of the things we need to do is simply enforce the laws that are on the books and demand that this administration, which has ordered United States attorneys and immigration officials not to enforce the laws of this land, not to take into custody and not to deport those who are arrested in this country and who are here unlawfully. We need to do that, and we, the people, need to insist on it and do what Neil Warren, for example, is doing here in Cobb County, and that is making sure that those who are in this country unlawfully and violate the law are detained and deported.
And I want to thank all of our candidates for doing a fantastic job of largely staying within the time boundary. Trust me, that's easier said than done. And now we will move to our closing statements, and we'll start with Mr. Barr and work our way back over toward Ms. Pradman. Mr. Barr?
You know, contrary to one of the rules or myths of politics that all politics is local, it ain't so. All politics is not local. Members of Congress take an oath of office, as I've taken 4 times as your representative from the 7th District, as your United States Attorney under Presidents Reagan and Bush, and earlier in my career as a CIA official. Those oaths mean something. Those oaths need action to back them up. And the action, as a member of Congress, with Bob Barr, you've seen Bob Barr out there fighting against an imperial presidency and leading the impeachment. You've seen Bob Barr up there helping to pass the first balanced budget in 4 decades at the same time as we cut taxes and reformed welfare. You've seen Bob Barr lead the effort in the House of Representatives to repeal the Clinton gun ban, to protect our civil liberties, the right to keep and bear arms. You have seen Bob Barr fight for the National Cemetery here in the 11th District would not be there had not I and other members years ago began the process to make sure that we have a final resting place in North Georgia for our veterans and for their families. These are actual accomplishments. It's not talk, it's action. That's what we need in Washington. That is the only way that we will slow down the juggernaut of big government and the liberals up there. Doesn't come through talk, doesn't come through just saying, oh, I'm going to do this when I get there. It doesn't come from simply saying, oh, I'm going to introduce a bunch of bills. Introducing a bill is the easiest thing in the world. You just draft it up and you take it down to the clerk of the House. The real hard work is getting those bills passed. The real hard work is getting those appropriations limitations on an administration so that you can come home and do more than simply talk about it. You can point, as I do this evening, in asking for your vote, to an actual record of moving our conservative agenda forward. We have begun the process. We did it before. We can do it again. Send Bob Barr to the Congress and let me finish the job.
Growing up here in Georgia, my parents instilled a set of values in me that we have passed on to our children. Those values are put God first, serve others before yourself, and that standing for what is right isn't always easy, but it is always right. My dad was a medic in World War II, and he saw the absolute worst of what humans can do to one another. But he always stayed positive because he had his eyes upon his cause, not his circumstances. My dad lived those values every day. And one thing he used to tell me is, son, never complain. Complaining does nothing. If there's something you don't like, you have 2 choices. One, you can do something to change the situation, or just accept it as inevitable and go on with your life. In 2004, I saw that my state government was going in the wrong direction, so I took my dad's advice And I took my experience as a husband and a father and a veteran, an employee and an employer as a small business owner to the state capitol, where I became known as one of the foremost conservative leaders in Georgia because of my consistent stance on faith, family, and freedom. Because of that consistent stance, I have received the endorsement of most every major conservative organization in America. Family Research Council, Concerned Women of America, Restore Our Republic, Madison Project. And because of my service as a veteran and knowing the value of a strong national defense, we received the endorsement of the National Defense Pact. Most recently, FreedomWorks announced that I was one of the top 5 conservative candidates in the nation, and Senate Conservatives Fund named me the #2 candidate running for the House in the entire nation. As of today, we're the most endorsed candidate running for office across the nation. Why? Because I have consistently stood for those values of faith, family, and freedom. This is the most critical election in the history of our nation. Our children don't see that they have a future, but it's up to us to ensure that they have a future that is free, safe, and full of opportunity. I need your help. I need your vote. www.standwithbarry.com. God bless you and thank you very much.